Launch Today is the podcast focused on what it takes to get your business to $1 million or more in revenue. From marketing tactics to incredible guest interviews, we focus on sharing behind-the-scenes insight from masters in their field. If you want to grow your revenue for your startup or business, you don't want to miss today, because joining us is a master of strategies and tactics for repeatable growth and developer of an awesome growth system he calls Karma Curve, Mik Strøyberg. Mik Strøyberg is a serial entrepreneur with a gift for scaling the business approach to market expansion into a systematic framework that helps businesses scale with purpose. As a developer of one of those myself, I'm super excited to dive into what he's doing. How he recommends you grow and scale. Today, we'll be exploring this unique perspective on sustainable growth and the art of entering new markets successfully. Mik, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. I want to dive right into this because we only have an hour and I have 400 questions.
Fair enough. Let's just jump into it.
Karma Curve has 8 distinct steps. What helped you break down market expansion to this specific framework? And how did your experience with Lemon Squeeze and Good Monday influence this development?
Yeah, so actually, Karma Curve has 7 steps. So there is the market. 7 steps, yeah. There's market preparation, then there you have your engagement, you have your traction over to traction and validation. Then you have your scale, your growth, and then you have your new market.
I miscounted somehow.
And below those, you have...
Okay. My apologies then. Where did I get it wrong? What's the 8th step I manufactured?
I super remember it.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's 7 different
steps.
Actually 7 different chapters, and then it's 30 different things you have to do during those chapters. And to give you a fly-in, the reason why I created Karma Curve was actually 6 years after Lemon Squeeze getting acquired. And the main reason was when you enter a new market, when you do market expansion, there's so many things you need to have under control. It's super difficult, but it's the same steps as when you start a company. But often you mix match it. So if you look at it like baking banana bread, if you follow a recipe, it can go wrong and it can be bad, but it's not that bad. It's something where it looks like a banana bread. It almost tastes like a banana bread. Maybe it's not the best banana bread, but you're pretty close. If you don't follow a recipe and it's the first time you do it, which it is for like almost every founder only enters a new line once with one company, a few does it twice. And it's a handful from each country that does it more than 5 times. Instead of going out there and doing our McKinsey Boston Consulting Group 1,000 pages report, I said, what does everybody understand? And everybody understands that what you get is actually also what you get. And hence the Karma Curve. And using the analogy of a skateboard ramp. And again, there is momentum in a skateboard ramp because it's based on mathematics. And again, what you put in when you need to move fast, when it's going slow, which is in this Karma Curve, it's traction and validation, where you need to spend the most time to get not a market fit, but a go-to-market fit. It's actually based on how you would skate on a half pipe. So when we had founders coming over to Lemon Squeeze and they heard it takes 18 months to set up a company in the US, we said we can probably do it in 18 days if you understand this process. And it was mainly because we could then dictate what do we need to do first, because everything else, it opens doors. So if you start with number 11 and jump to number 18, then suddenly you can't get to number 6 because you haven't unlocked number 4. So again, I can give you the most boring example in the entire world, but let's just take banking, accounting, office, visa, hiring the first employee. If you don't have an address, you can't get your bank. There are nowhere to send it. You can't get the office if you don't have the bank. But you can't get a bank if you don't have a visa. But the visa, you need to have a company. So have you set up your entity, but you can't set up your entity because that demands an address. And everything goes in different ways. But if you know which one to take first and how to actually order it up to make sure you get all of these different steps right, then it actually goes super fast. But the problem is, if you don't know the order, It's a nightmare.
I've got it. That makes a lot of sense.
So that's why something that is complex should always be dumbed down, because the complexity is there. So there's no reason to talk about how complex it is when everybody knows it. So let's dumb it down to make sure that we get an overview and move from there.
I think it's nuclear physicist Richard Feynman who talks about you don't really understand something if you can't explain it to a 5-year-old. As somebody with twin 5-year-olds who asked me, Daddy, what do you do for a living? I have realized I don't even understand marketing because I'm like, Daddy sits in an office and talks to people and helps them make money. And that's about the best I can do for 5-year-olds. So I feel you. All right. So really insightful. Thank you for that. 7 distinct steps. I'll remember that. I think the half pipe I just thought was 4 and 4. I'm like, the graphic. There we go. So I think we've learned 2 things about you, Mik. One is you must have done some skateboarding, and 2, you must have done some baking because you went straight for banana bread. Explain for me, if you will, because you already just talked about all the legal, the accounting side of like making a new market. What is new market prep in the karma curve system?
Again, new market prep. So sitting down with investors and your board, talking about it would be a good idea of thought to go into a new market. There's pretty far from what you're thinking to what you're actually doing. And with new market prep, it's everything you need to consider before you even enter. And especially going from the US to Europe, from Europe to the US, from the US to Indonesia or South America. Because if you just think you can enter based on what you're already doing, you're probably already sailing. Because there's a likelihood that the company you're setting up is going to look different than the one you have in your current market. So new market prep is all about, first of all, getting product market fit. And if you already have it in your local market, doesn't mean you have it in your new market. So again, for me, one of the things that we did a lot was if a company came to us and said, we want to enter, first we went through all the different steps. We just asked them if they had already done something or if they haven't started at all. Hopefully they haven't started at all. And then before we even got started, we asked them for 14 days to think about it. And during those 14 days, we went out and sold it to main decision makers, key customer clients. So we actually went out there and talked to them because we wanted to figure out, first of all, would they say yes just based on what they have right now? If they said no, would it then be price, color? Is it because we're selling to an audience? I can give you an example. We had a company within hospitality that was selling to primarily restaurants where their product wasn't in Spanish, but they were moving from a European market to an American market and into New York, where it was 80% Spanish labor, suddenly within hospitality. And then there was like a ton of different things. There was something about invoicing because we wanted to invoice from the European company and 50% of the American companies wouldn't allow it to. So we had this checklist where when we sat down with the company again after 14 days, we had to decline helping them, just like an investor would decline investing based on different factors. But we wouldn't decline and say, never come back. What we came back with was a new recipe, right? It was a new thing. When we get these things in order, when you start to modify or optimize on these items, then we think it would be possible. And we were in a position where we helped companies enter and expand into new markets, and we couldn't have failure rate. Because if we had a failure rate of 50, then suddenly we would be a bad company. We needed to have something that was close to 100. So if we didn't treat it professionally by giving the company our honest opinion, we wouldn't get those. So in the market prep, there was a ton of different things. So first of all, is there a product market set? If no, which items do we need to get in control? And then there's everything else you need to know before entering the new market, which is primarily knowing the process. Is this something we can afford? How long time do we have? Do we need to raise in the meantime? Like everything that needs to come into order. And most of the companies we help were younger than 15 years. And I think for a lot of them, the bio cost for a founder, you know what bio
no, please
cost
define
is?
that.
No. So bio cost is when you're standing in the shower and you're stressing a bit about a ton of items that you don't really know what is. And if you know them, you don't know the answer to them, but they're still stressing you the fuck out. So you're using a ton of bio cost, like a ton of energy on something that you can't fix, you can't do anything about, and you have no knowledge about. We wanted to make sure that there is zero bio cost by landscaping everything, giving them directions, making sure they have a manual so they didn't have to think about it, because it's difficult enough to, one, run a company in your local market, two, to start running a company in a new market. So we really tried to focus on that part.
Awesome. So the beginning step in how I model out go-to-market is basically figuring out audience, problem, fit, and then seeing if you can attract them repeatably. If you can, you've got the beginnings of a business. If you can't, start over. You got to figure it out. So really a similarity there with your new market prep. Is there a fit here? And I remember there's a famous case study for Coca-Cola when they went into China. They're like, we're called Coca-Cola. We're not changing the name. And no one would buy it because in Chinese, the name was dysphonic. It didn't sound good. No one wanted to buy it. And that was, the culture wasn't right to make the shift to, what if we called it something that people wanted to buy in China? No. And when they changed it to the Chinese equivalent of makes mouths happy, then people would buy. And so it's very much you've got to be willing to have the market tell you what it wants. You cannot be, I am right, to hell with you, because the market won't buy if the market won't buy. Okay. During your time scaling companies like Issue in the U.S. market, what are challenges you found with market setup that other founders should think about as they're scaling, either for their first time or in a new market?
But that was actually the reason why I created Lemon Squeeze. That was because the first company I brought to the U.S. was Issue. And I did that on my own with help from the rest of the management. And I made so many mistakes. And a lot of them were mistakes that shouldn't have been made, but I just didn't know better. And it was all about keeping momentum and entering fast. But I didn't know, I didn't know the step-by-step process. And then I was, in the evenings and weekends, I was moonlighting, not getting paid, of course, but for companies that reached out and said, you just entered and you're now in the US market. How did you do it? What did you do? And when I started to figure out how to do that in a Word doc and then even to an Excel sheet, and then trying to do it online, I saw that it was extremely basic if you knew it. If you didn't, it was almost impossible. And when you ask someone for advice, let's just say you had entity, immigration, accounting, banking, and all the other things, that there's not one person that takes care of everything, like a turnkey solution of any kind. If there is, it's extremely expensive. And often you can't afford it. You can't afford to put down $300,000 just to get an overview. And if you go to one of the different elements, like accounting or entity, they can't answer anything else. Also because legally, they can't say anything. So when I did the checklist and when I tried to explain what I did and what they should do, then I just got stronger and stronger in all the different facets. And there's a ton of them because, again, in the 7 steps, I made a ton of mistakes in all 7 that could have been avoided if I just knew what I had to do. So it wasn't me doing a bad job. It was me not knowing. And I think, again, the reason why we did Karma Curve, the reason why Karma Curve is free is because if you have the potential and if you really want to reach a new market, it shouldn't be the process or you not knowing the step-by-step manual. It should be because your product isn't good enough or you're not good enough. It shouldn't be because you don't know, because people are making it too complex for you.
I completely agree. I love that point of view. Go-to-market is a repeatable thing. I built 85 now $1 million marketing engines because if you know the steps, rather like with Lemon Squeeze, right? Success rate nearly 100%. If you know the steps, it works. But so many people don't, and so they go, you gamble, you got to hope. Maybe I'll figure out marketing. Maybe I won't. Okay, so what does traction and validation look like when it's starting to work? How do you know I'm trying to get this traction going. It's been a while, and now maybe it's starting to tick. What's the sign someone should look for?
Yeah. So again, just for the sake of the case, let's dumb it down. If $1 turns into $2, you're on the right path. That's like, and if you hire someone and they give you twice as much back, it works. Marketing works. PR, if the effort and the hours put into it actually comes back, it works. Often it all depends. Again, it depends on which kind of company you are in which industry. So there's a big difference between B2C and B2B and B2B2C for that matter. Because it's different things you measure on. If it's B2B, then often you see it within your SDRs and BDRs, the way they're contacting, what works, which kind of channels, which kind of verticals. So again, for some, it's phones. For others, it's emails. And for some, it's both. And it can be everything. For some, it's direct marketing in or PR paving the way. For others, enterprise B2Bs, it's larger partnerships that makes the difference. So one thing you have to do first, and that's the most important thing, before entering traction and validation, you need to determine what you're going for. Because the biggest problem with traction and validation when entering a new market is that some kind of opportunity will arise out of the blue. And because you've been struggling for 6 months to try to validate what you are doing right now, because that's what you believe in, you see that small, success out there that you can catch and benefit from immediately, but it will take you off course. And then suddenly it will turn into a much longer game. And one of the things I've seen the most and missing out on traction validation is people suddenly there's a company that says, we want to do a 25% partnership and you'll get 15 of our clients and then you get opted out. Maybe something will happen on the other side. And you put all your eggs in that basket, but you just fucked up the last 6 months of trying to get that validation in your go-to-market. Because you want something you can tell your colleagues, your management, your wife, your kids that you're actually succeeding in something, and you need that approval because you're fighting hard. What you need to do is be determined on what we agreed on and the direction we're going. Everything can be modified, but a direct pivot needs a stronger argument. But it comes to a place where the way that we see it, if you take market prep towards the end of traction validation, when you say, I want to enter a new market, as big as the European market or the US market, you're worth nothing. It's worth the idea that you want to do something that's great. When you hit the point of traction validation where you can say, if you give me 1 million, I'll give you 2. And I can base it on these 2 years of proven facts, then suddenly you're a fun case. If you after a year more can say, if you give me 1, I'll give you 15.
Oh, yeah.
Then you're on the right path. When raising money and when entering a new market, the faster you can go from market prep to go-to-market validation. So actually from product validation in new market to go-to-market validation in new market, the higher valuation will be. So if you can do it in 6 months, then you can take your company and you can actually find that.
Yeah. One of the common things I tell startups I'm mentoring is one of the common points where a startup dies is its first enterprise client, because that enterprise client is going to try to make you a very poorly paid outsourced dev company. And if founders aren't smart and keep that distance, they will die just because it's $4,000 a month and you will kill yourself for that $4,000 a month, not realizing that you're putting $20,000 a month worth of labor into servicing this one crappy contract. And that can be such a mistake because it sounds big when they pay you upfront for the year.
But it's not a mistake that, again, it's a mistake that everyone does and everyone has done. And it's also, I think it's one of the biggest things happening in a boardroom is often the CEO coming to the board and saying, we have this huge opportunity with this amazing enterprise company and it's a ticket of $500,000 and that would give us an extra 5 months of run rate. And this is where the board has to be strong. This is where if you have an experienced board, they will also know the consequences of sleeping with a mistress here.
Yeah. Excellent. I do also agree. Every startup I'm talking to, when they're like, I want to raise a round and then we'll figure out marketing. I'm like, no, brother. You figure out how to turn $1 into three is the number I always give them, but $1 into 2 or 3, that's when the investors come knocking, when you don't need their money anymore.
Yes. And again, if you take the counter curve, there is something that is operational basics. There's something that's human. There's something that's operational basics, something that's human, and something that's operational basics. So if you take the establishment, the first one, when you start going down that curve, that's all about, again, that's faking. That's something where you just need to get your shit in order. And it's something that is so unsexy that it's almost having sex with socks on, right? But you have to do it, and you have to go through all those different points.
A definition of unsexy.
But then yeah, that's what I've heard. The next part, when you go into the market setup, then suddenly we're talking about people, because now you need to have your people in order. You need to know who you're actually talking to, who would be the prime decision makers in everything you do. And this is where you have the ideal customer profile and you have all the other stuff. But based on all of this, you need to figure out, do I need the person with the biggest Rolodex? Do I need the person who's been in this? Do I need someone from the industry, or would it actually be more beneficial to get someone from outside the industry? And how do I make sure? Because they're going to work with the local market a lot. They're going to be alone a lot, because if you have 100 people in your home country, then you'll have 2, maybe 4, maybe 6 at some point. They're going to be so lonely, especially when there's a big Christmas party and summer party and they're not invited and something is happening and Friday bars. And when the others are talking, there are 8 in a room and you're sitting there alone with 2 others, figuring out how to onboard them to make sure it's not just understanding the company and the company culture, but it's actually understanding the culture of where these people are from and making sure you actually do it in the right way. So with all our companies, again, 100 plus, we flew all employees to the country where they were entering from, because they needed to see it in action. They needed to go out there. They need to get a beer on the local pub. They needed to go out and meet the people and figure out how all of this works and the pricing in the local city and how they communicate. And I think that's the whole personal thing. When you go into traction validation, it starts being operational again. This is the set. This is how we're going to move forward. We're going to measure everything. And it's going to be an agile process where we look at all the different KPIs of what we believe we can turn into a growth engine. So that's operational. When you go into scale, there's often a new set of people being involved, because suddenly you're going up. You need new management, maybe. Maybe you even need to fly people over from the local country to now take over from someone else or be a part of it to make sure culture doesn't, again, you go past 15, 20 people, culture dies, or it becomes a subculture to the real company, which is sometimes okay, but often if you want to keep that momentum, again, the company's hot, you need to have someone in. So there's a lot of people in the whole scale part. When then comes to growth, again, that's probably where you come in as well. There's a lot of numbers. And it's not like you want to hire someone that's good at creating a cool payout. You want to hire a nerd like yourself that knows numbers down to the detail, that works in the Excel sheet, not in a Keynote. Because now you're growing and you need to make sure that the 2x that became a 10x is now a 100x. People are staying in the equation, but the focus is on the people who are outside of that. They're more in the equation, the people who can actually make the Excel sheets for. And then when you go into new market prep, because now you're done with the American market or the US market, you want to go to Asia. What did we learn? We know that we're entering a new market. We know that everything is going to be different. We know we're going to do everything in a different way. But did we fuck up in the onboarding? Should we have taken more care of the people? Did we fuck up in the way that we gave instructions instead of letting other people pave the way because they're smarter than us? Where did we make small mistakes? Where if we take that into the new market, we then do it even better. Making sure that we create the new common curve based on the first common curve and put in all the learnings. It becomes your tool. Yeah, I think that's it.
I love how passionate you are about this. You really care about it, which is awesome to see.
I do, but I care about founders. I care about founders that are succeeding through this, because, again, if there's 7 different steps with 30 different things underneath, then there is another 300 things happening underneath those 30 steps. And I've seen way too many divorces, way too many bankruptcies, way too many people getting angry at each other, not based on company culture, product, or anything else, based on they're in way too deep. And that's why we created this. Is can we help anyone not getting divorced, making it a new market, making sure your friends doesn't leave you because you start being an asshole, all these
Gotcha.
things. I think that's
So this is an elegant system. Every step follows each one simply. I've worked with companies like Standard Chartered Bank, which are not known for smallness and agility. You've worked with Nike and Vice. How does a framework this simple fit into a large organization where I tend to find that simplicity can be really hard to sell sometimes?
Yes, again, Nike and Red Bull and UN, they were a part of the issue. We partnered up with them and got all their back catalogs to make sure that we could get all their publications in. That was not a market entry. That was partnerships based on how can we make sure that the back catalogs of everything they've done could actually be valuable after the season. Again, if you take New York Times, when you read the newspaper, you're never reading it again. But all the back catalogs that they had were people actually still reading 1 year later because it could be my trip to Sri Lanka, or it could be going skiing in that. But there could be all different things that is not outdated. So we put them in and made sure that they could keep advertising them. That was a different creature. But of the larger companies that we helped, what they loved in the beginning was actually when we did the establishment and the startup, the biggest part for them was market setup and traction and validation and how fast we could get to market, because they understood that if we could do that in 6 weeks or in 8 weeks, then it would be zero problem for them to sell it to the whole. And their biggest problem was, should we enter or shouldn't we? What we did with the larger companies was the new market spread, where I said we went out there and talked to 10 clients. Instead of going to the end of traction validation, we went out there as a SWAT team and got traction and validation confirmed in the new market prep. And then they could start with everything. But then we knew exactly what was needed in traction and validation. So the first 2 parts were something that we could easily get done. So instead of going out and talking to 10 clients, you talk to 100.
Gotcha. Interesting.
It's easier to sell something to the board if you have income.
I get that. Well, the largest in the world had been picked to it for $25K. Let's go. Right. So it was okay, at this point, sunken cost fallacy, might as well give it a shot. Right. So, okay. The name Karma Curve suggests a certain philosophy about business growth, and that you talk about growing with purpose. I think does the same thing. How does your mindset in this influence the practical application of each step for somebody else? I know the karma curve that you were on with your journey, but how is this somebody else's karma curve too?
Yes, this could be everyone's karma curve. We facilitated these steps for other companies, but when I talk to, again, I also advise young entrepreneurs and people who are starting their first company. We go through the karma curve together because I need to know where they are, because sometimes when they explain their company and the journey that they're on, they could state things like, we have product market fit. And I asked about go-to-market fit, and they say, yeah, we have some people buying it. And when you dig into that, you can see that they think they're in the place where they can start stealing, but they're not close. They're not even there yet. Like, they haven't even started market setup. So what we do is, because you can jump as far as you want, you can also jump and say, now I'm in growth mode. But if that happens, you won't be growing for such a long time. So if I started a new company tomorrow, I would follow this as well. This is more the practical parts of what do I need to get done first. So you could also say new market prep could be validation of restarting this company. That would be the first part. And when I had a lot of people saying yes, and they even paid me money, then I could say, okay, let's establish the company. Let's get an accountant on board and do stuff. So instead of going directly into accounting entities and so forth, first we did something. And I think like the whole karma curve is all about knowing where you're at. So when I talk to a founder, the first question is often, how's it going? And the problem is you can say it's going good or it's going bad, and then they'll start talking into something. But if I ask them, like, where are you at with the company's journey, we can be extremely specific. And even if it's friends or if someone I'm guiding or someone else, we'll get to a point where we actually have productive conversation based on, I want to know if you say it's not going that well or if it's going great, where are you at? Is it going great onboarding new people? Is it going great with scaling, going into the new phase of getting more seniors on board? Or right now hiring marketing geniuses because you need to grow the business? I need to know. And it could also be because I'm entering my environment. So there's a conversation around common curve that makes it easier. It's like going into couples therapy, where at first there's a baseline that you just need to set up. It's like, why are we even here? And then often it comes up to who initiated this meeting? Like, why did we go in and like, why are we sitting down right now? And Karma Curve is the same. It's creating a baseline and something to talk from instead of just talking from free motion or the last thing you did. Often, if you go directly to a cocktail party from work and people ask you how you're doing, you think about the latest task you just did, which means you can really like
recency bias. Yeah.
Like, yes, exactly.
Awesome. So, okay, something I always like to ask people on the show, because the answers continue to surprise and impress me, is, do you have a book, fiction or nonfiction, that you think a founder should read?
I have a ton of books that I think founders should read. I don't even know which one would come up first. I just read a book, but it actually says in the book that remember not to tell people. It's not saying don't tell people not to read this book, but it's telling the reader, don't go out there and preach what you just read. And it's a Buddhism book. The problem with it is it's like becoming vegan, where you want to preach to the world, right? There's something where you want to give out the message because you actually, after reading it, you believe in it so strongly. And it's like how Stoicism went in the last couple of years because it's suddenly easy readable, where everybody can face stuff like, it's okay, you're going to die anyways. Don't be too hard on yourself. But I think all of those books, especially within Stoicism and the other stuff, I think they're all extremely valuable. I don't even know what the latest book I read was. It's on a book. No, the latest book I read was, and I think that's something for all founders as well, or I've reread it because I read it for my son, was The Little Prince. But that's
French or in
because,
English?
Again, looking at a topic. Yeah, okay. I read it in English. I had tried to read it in French, but that's a long time ago. And today I wouldn't understand a word. But the cool thing about it, and again, I just read a chapter to my wife the other day. The cool thing about it is how stupid we get when we grow up and how much we try to. And I just boxed the entire market expansion, right? Because I needed to dumb it down because or else people around me wouldn't understand it. And the complexity isn't beautiful anymore. It's not art. But if you ask a kid, they wanted to see Mike Strøyberg go up and down in different colors and do everything beautifully. And that was where it started. There's something about how we try to box everything as we go. And that's also why when you see larger companies growing, you see them become more boring and you see them become streamlined and you see how, again, the first movers and the people who actually believe in it start drifting away because it lost the identity of everything. And it's because they lost their childhood. They lost the naivety and the product and what they wanted to achieve because suddenly it's about growth and turning it into a money machine. And I think that's pretty important as well because life is
long, but it's also short, right? That's Buddhism and Stoicism.
Yeah, exactly.
So I went Catholic high school, and there's a lot that I was dumb about it. But one of the parts that has stuck with me for all the years since is we had a year of comparative religion. And so we studied Hinduism, we studied Buddhism, we studied a number of other faiths, and how a lot of them deal with the fact that, listen, you're only here a little bit of time, really. Maybe don't stress so much. As a founder, like your job is to bring the urgency to keep your company going. Your job is to believe your company into being. Because if you don't believe in it, nobody else will. But also, Yeah, you do need to learn a little bit of, as Le Petit Prince talks about, right? Grown-ups are stupid, and
Yeah.
we've lost some of that spark. I think founders still hold that spark more because they're creating something. But you're right. Eventually,
Yeah. I did a LinkedIn post on it because I was going for a morning run and I just heard something. I think it was a podcast where there was a founder speaking and I thought about the passion around it. And then I thought about the word founder because it's like the foundation, but founder is also because you're founding a company. It's because you're establishing it. It has something to do with signing some documents and making it legal. But what if it wasn't that? What if it was a true founder? Because everybody can establish a company and call themselves a founder. But what if a true founder, someone that found something that they couldn't let go of, so they had to pursue it? So it's all about finding it that turns you into a founder because now you're doing it, even though it's terrible and you put everything else apart, like being an addict, saying yes to one thing, but then no to everything else.
right.
Being in that whole world. And I think like when people say he's not a real founder or she's not a real founder, and what do they mean? But actually, if they're just doing it based on one-time thing because they need some money, they're probably not a founder. They're probably a company owner. And I think a founder is someone that can't let go of whatever idea that popped in that is for them so obvious and genius that they have to pursue it. So finding something makes you a founder. Establishing a company
What
first.
an interesting point of view. I love it. All right. Let me ask one last question. You mentioned that the karma curve was developed with the spirit of love, karma, and support. This is not
Yes.
how Nike talks, right? This is not how boardrooms talk. How did your personal values lead you to this? And do you find people who use the karma curve reflect those values as they build?
Yeah, I think so. I can give you a personal story. I decided in 2010 not to say no to anyone who reached out.
For
For
example,
example,
me.
you.
Okay.
Like, so if someone reaches out, I want to make sure that I'm not being arrogant. I want to make sure that there is not an opportunity wasted. And I also wanted to make sure that everybody is being respected. And I've helped a ton of companies. At Lemon Squeeze, we probably had more than, I don't know, 20,000 people visiting, maybe more than 1,000 companies. And we said yes to everyone. If it was like everything from all those kindergarten to all the way up to different alignments to the Queens, Denmark, and so forth, like everyone. And I didn't really get anything back for all the efforts and hours I put into it. Like, and at some point, I actually said, a few years back, 2022, I actually said to my wife, do you think karma is a thing? Because I feel like that karma owes me like the ocean, the Atlantic, something. And she said, it will count. And then the last year, I didn't ask for anything, but people just came with all these things to me. And it's people that I've met through life. And it really warmed me. And I really believe that karma exists. And one of the things that happened was I went to New York with a company and they asked me to set up a ton of meetings. And I just reached out to all my old contacts over again. And all these meetings, people said, we don't care what you do, but if it helps make, we'd love to do it. Like that whole thing about building in enough for us to meet again throughout the life journey because we've been there and because it's been honest and truthful. I really believe in that.
Okay.
And again, it's fun when you do the karma curve, right? It's because what comes in goes back, and that's what a skater does.
Gotcha. Awesome. All right. So,
Can I just say, like the first one you said, it's not for the phone use, not for management, like it's not something if you're author. It should be. And I think companies, if they were present enough, if they were bold enough to talk more about love and harmony on the way and make sure that when you build something, it wasn't always with an intention. And sometimes when you did things, it was also to please others. Again, just started a new community for a company called Foodback. It's called Prosecco and Pizza Club. And the CEO asked me, what are we going to gain from this? I said, I don't know. We must gain something, or else we just would be wasting money. I said, first of all, let's just say there's 50 people there. What we should do with these 50 people is give them a slice and give them a sip of Prosecco, and then we should figure out how we can help them. Like, how does that help us? I said, we'll see. We'll figure it out. And then we've had the first Prosecco and Pizza Club, and you can just feel the wave of people because we're helping them help each other without bringing food back into the equation. But we're in the equation because we're doing this. And I think the kicker is how often we feel like how awesome it is to be us and actually being able to facilitate this. And right now, without feeling anything. And in my true belief is that suddenly we will gain. And we will gain in something that we could never have done in a growth phase behind an Excel sheet. It's something where we just open up. And then at some point, maybe get that.
I feel you. When I was CMO for a hardware company called Contact.io, the technology that we had was relatively new. And we invested in holding luncheons in 14 cities around the world. They were just free, right? There was, come have a lunch. We'll pay for the lunch. We'll give you some of our hardware. Just go play with it. Learn how we're basically driving adoption of the tech. And I remember I got the spreadsheet mentality, right? The accounting team was like, you can't do these anymore. They don't make money.
Yeah.
And I'm like, we met Google when we did a lunch and learn in San Francisco, and they bought 750,000 units from us. What do you mean this doesn't make money? And they were like, well, but in the CRM, it's sourced as a different contact. I'm like, okay, but the first time they ever met any of us was when one of their engineers came to our lunch and learned. How do you think they learned enough to reach out to us? That is, we didn't do it because we knew that Google would come. I didn't know Google was there. But they mentioned to us, they came up. They're like, hey, we're two engineers at Google. Cool. That is you give out, and then you'll win back sometimes in ways you don't expect. I love it. All right, Mik.
Which is the definition of power.
If somebody wants to find you online, where do they look for you to find out more about you and our Karma Curve?
They just go directly to LinkedIn. I think it's /Mik Strøyberg. They'll find me there, or they can go to karmacurve.cl.
All right. Thank you so much for your time today. If you want to learn more about building and growing and scaling and some of the struggles founders go through both mentally and entrepreneurially as they grow and scale, you make sure to subscribe. You don't want to miss next week. We're talking to Rand Fishkin of Moz.com and Spark Toro. Thanks, everybody. We'll be in touch. Thank you very much, Mik.